My name is Chase, and I'm the lead pastor here at River's Edge, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for gathering with us today where we gather together to celebrate something amazing. The greatest Sunday of the year, the fact that Jesus is alive. We don't just think about this ancient book, and we don't worship and serve and believe in a God who is just dead, but a God who is alive today. A God who works in our life today in the same way he did back then. So it's Easter Sunday, and I know that there's a lot of people here that this ain't your first Easter service ever. I mean, you've been going to church a long time, and you've hit many Easter services. But I also know that there are people here today, this is the first time you showed up at a church on Easter Sunday. Maybe someone invited you and you happily came, and maybe you were dragged along. But either way, I'm so glad that you're here as well. And it's my job over the next little bit to just simply take a story that happened 2,000 years ago and help you see its relevance and its impact that it should have and can have on your life today. No pressure, right? But you know what would make it easier? I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could talk to someone who was alive then? Wouldn't it be great if we could talk to a follower of Jesus? I mean, I wonder what that would be like.
Jesus called me the Rock. Hi, my name is Peter. I was fishing one day when this man named Jesus asked me to follow him. And I can't explain it, but I did. I left everything I knew and I started following him.
You are Peter.
That's me.
The one who walked on water.
Yep, that is me. I remember Jesus was standing in the water. And so I said, if it is you, Jesus, I'm coming out. I started walking on water. It was amazing.
It sounds amazing. But I've read my Bible a few times, and weren't you also the one where Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan"?
Well, I don't really want to talk about that one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, you know I wasn't perfect. Following Jesus was sometimes hard, but it was always worth it.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions. I'd love to hear more about the walking on water. And to be honest, there's some great things Peter saw. He saw people come back from the dead. He saw people get saved. I mean, he saw hundreds of miracles. And to be honest, I could use a few preaching tips if you had any. But it's Easter Sunday, and we came here today to talk about the end of the life of Jesus, to talk about his death and his resurrection. What do you know about that?
Well, I remember we were in the garden, and Jesus wanted us to pray. But we were also tired, and we kept falling asleep. And the soldiers came and arrested Jesus. But I followed after him, and I denied.
I have it right here what happened. In Luke's, a letter from Luke, he said, they arrested Jesus, they led him to the high priest's home, and you, Peter, you did follow after him at a distance. It said the guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard, and they sat around it, and Peter, you joined them there. But then came a servant girl, and she noticed you in the firelight, and she began staring at you. And finally she said, this man was one of Jesus' followers. But you denied it, and you said,
"Woman, I don't even know him."
But then after a while, someone else looked at you, and they said, you must be one of them. And you shouted back,
"No, man, I'm not."
This is an hour later, someone else insisted, this must be one of them. He is a Galilean too.
But again I said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And while I was still speaking, I heard the rooster crow. At that moment, Jesus turned and looked at me. I remembered what he had said to me earlier. Before the rooster crows tomorrow, you will deny 3 times that you even know me.
And then the story says that you left the courtyard weeping bitterly. You know, when I think of Peter, I honestly first think of a hero of the faith. I mean, Peter was a disciple of Jesus. I mean, physically followed Jesus around. Peter was a preacher who preached to many people. But I also see, although a faithful follower, he still failed. He still messed up. He still put his foot in his mouth a few times. But I love what he said. He said, following Jesus isn't always easy. Following Jesus can sometimes be hard, but it's always worth it. No matter what, if you're trying to follow after Jesus, even when you mess up, it's always worth it. The story goes on and it says that they arrested Jesus, they put him on this little mini trial in front of Pilate, and Pilate was the man in charge at the time. And Pilate looks out and he says, I don't see anything wrong with this man. No reason to crucify him, no reason to him to be arrested, but to appease the crowd, he decided, I will have him beaten and flogged. And maybe this will satisfy the crowd. So it says that he gives him away to the Roman soldiers to whip him and beat him. And these soldiers, their job was death. They were brutal, and they were good at it. When I started thinking about that, I started thinking there was an actual human being, a real person that beat Jesus, a real person that drove nails into his hands. I can't imagine what that would be like. A person that nailed Jesus to the cross.
I was just doing my job. My job was to be a soldier, to punish criminals. We thought this Jesus was a criminal. So we beat and we whipped him.
I have a letter right here. It says that Jesus had him flogged with a lead-tipped whip, and then the soldiers, you did a little more than that. You wove a crown of thorns together and you put it on his head, and then you put a purple robe on him and you shouted, "Hail, King of Jews!" They mocked. And it says that you slapped him across the face.
Yeah, okay, I guess. We got a little carried away. But like I said, we thought he was a criminal. We thought that he deserved this, but he did not deserve any of this.
The story goes on and it says that the beating wasn't enough. It didn't suffice the crowds, and they wouldn't let up. They kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." So Pilate was forced to have Jesus crucified.
Yeah, so we had him carry his cross to the place where we were going to crucify him, which is what we always did. We nailed him to the cross, hung it up. We crucified Jesus.
And from that moment, what do you remember about it?
You know, I'll never forget what he said. It was the craziest thing. There he was hanging on the cross, and he shouts out, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." We were killing Jesus, and he was asking for forgiveness for us. Then he died.
One of the letters in the Bible, it says this, that Jesus then shouted again, released his spirit. And at that moment, when Jesus died, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split apart. It says the Roman officers and the other soldiers like yourself at the crucifixion, it says you were terrified by the earthquake and everything that happened.
It was at that moment we all knew this man was truly the Son of God. Until then, it was just another day. Jesus said, "Forgive them," and Jesus forgave us.
You know, when I think of the cross, I think of Jesus, who was an innocent man, never sinned, never failed, never messed up, and yet he died on the cross for us, gave up his life to forgive us, to set us free, to save us, all because of his love for us. Now there was some other people there as well. See, the soldiers, they had a great view of what was happening because they were nailing Jesus to the cross. But if we read in the story, we see that there was two other people there. Two criminals, one crucified on either side of Jesus. I mean, can you imagine what it was like to die next to Jesus?
Look, my life was far from perfect. I was a criminal. I did many things in my life that I'm not proud of. But on that day, I deserved to be there. I deserved the punishment that I was getting.
I know this may be hard, but tell us, what do you remember about that moment?
We were all nailed to our crosses, and the pain was unbearable, and I was terrified. But I remember the other guy, the other criminal on the other side of Jesus, started talking to him, and he said, "Hey, if you really are the Messiah, prove it. Save yourself, and while you're at it, save us too." I turned to him and I said, "Do you not even fear God when you have been sentenced to death? You and me, we deserve this. We deserve to be here. But this Jesus, he hasn't done anything wrong." And then I said to Jesus, I said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus looked at me and he said, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." It's the greatest thing I'd ever heard in my entire life. I was completely unworthy, undeserving of anything good. But Jesus forgave even me.
Hearing, but you see Peter, a follower of Jesus. You see this soldier who was kind of indifferent to Jesus, and then a criminal undeserving of anything good from Jesus. And yet, Jesus died for all of them. He forgave all of them, and he loved all of them. See, the cool thing about Jesus is that no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter who you are, he came and he died, and he can forgive anyone. And he loves all of us. I mean, God loves us so much that he sent Jesus on this great rescue mission. I mean, that's what the cross and Easter is all about. But before we get to the empty tomb, we had to start with the cross. That Jesus came and he died. And when he died, they took his body off the cross, and his heart had stopped beating and his lungs had stopped breathing air. He was, in fact, dead, and they placed his body in a tomb. And then it says that 3 days later, the tomb was empty. Jesus was alive, and Jesus is still alive, and the tomb today is still empty. And one of the unique parts about this story, especially for the time period that it was in, is that the first person to see Jesus alive was a woman named Mary Magdalene.
I was there. I saw it all.
You are Mary. I have a few questions. I'm not sure if anyone else has these, but I do. I need to know, who are you? Are you the woman that washed Jesus' feet with her hair and her tears? Or maybe you're the woman that was caught in adultery, that came before Jesus, the famous words where he spoke, "Anyone without sin, let him cast the first stone." Or are you the woman that was healed of the many demons? I just want to know, and I think maybe we all want to know, who are you?
It doesn't matter who I was, but who Jesus was. I can tell you this: I was at the cross. I saw them take Jesus' lifeless body down and carry it away. 3 days later, I went to the tomb where he was taken, and the stone, it had been rolled away. Jesus was gone, and the tomb was empty. I started to cry, but I looked inside anyway, and I saw 2 angels. They asked me why I was crying, and I told them that I was looking for my Lord. But they said to me, "Why do you look for the living among the dead?" I went to leave, and someone else was there. I just thought it was the gardener. But then he asked me why I was crying and who I was looking for. So I said to him, "If you have taken him, just tell me where he is, and I will go get him." But then he said my name. Mary. And I knew right then that it was Jesus. Because when he calls your name, you know it. I wanted to cling to him, but he told me to go and tell the others that Jesus is risen. He is alive. I ran back to tell everyone else, but no one really believed me. I know I probably sounded crazy. But I know this: I saw Jesus die. And then I saw Jesus alive.
I don't know about you. I'm not sure if I would have believed her. I'm not sure what I would have done.
I didn't believe her, so I had to see for myself. I ran back to the tomb, but it was empty. I was confused, and I didn't know what to believe. I get back to the house later when suddenly Jesus appeared. He was there in the flesh. I saw the scars on his hands and his feet and the wound on his side. Jesus had risen. It was amazing.
Now, many of us have heard the story of Jesus coming back from the dead, but there's this really cool story that happens afterwards. I mean, before he ascends to heaven, he came to you again. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
We were fishing and caught nothing all night. Then someone shouted from the shore, "Have you caught anything?" We said no. And the man said to throw our nets to the other side of the boat and you will get some. So we did. And the net started to fill up fast. We knew it right then. It was Jesus. I got out of the boat and went after him, and the others started to pull in all the fish, and we sat there eating breakfast with Jesus, risen from the dead.
Peter, do you remember what Jesus said to you?
He asked me, "Do you love me?" I said, "Yes," but I was ashamed of denying him 3 times. He asked me a second time, "Do you love me?" Again, I said, "Yes, you know I love you," but I was embarrassed of all I had done. And he asked me a third time, "Do you love me?" I realized Jesus was giving me a chance to redeem my 3 denials of him. So I said to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." Everything was different after that. I went on to see thousands of people put their faith in the crucified and resurrected Jesus. He came for me, and he died for me, and he rose again for me. And he forgave me, and he loves me. And you know what? He did that for everyone. And he loves all of you too.
There's Peter, the soldier, the criminal, and Mary. Every one of them impacted by what happened in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. So I think the obvious question is, what about you? What about you? Jesus came and lived a perfect life, one that you and I couldn't live. And he died a death that he didn't deserve for us. And Jesus, looking out over the crowd, when he said, "Forgive them," he was speaking to those that were killing him, but he was also speaking, I believe, to us here today. Because your sin and my sin put Jesus on the cross. So when he shouted, "Forgive them," he meant that to echo through the ages. Forgive them. He gave up his life so that you and I could live. So that you and I could be in a right relationship with God, one that can start right now and last the rest of this earthly life and carry us all the way in to eternity with God forever. But we have to respond. We can today on this Easter Sunday 2024, we can respond. We can put our faith in what Jesus did, to believe he came and died and rose again for us. To confess with our mouth that he is Lord, meaning he is the Son of God. He is Lord, meaning he is leader, which makes us a follower. Now, I don't know who you related most to in the story. Maybe you're in the room and you related to Peter, a follower of Jesus who failed. If you read about Peter, you'll see that man, he faithfully followed Jesus, but he messed up more than once. He had a tendency to place his foot into his mouth. I can relate to Peter. But Jesus gave him plenty of opportunity to right the wrong, plenty of opportunity to go on and to see thousands and thousands of people saved through the preaching of Peter. Now, maybe you relate more to the soldier, indifferent to the whole thing, just doing his job, didn't really know much about Jesus at this moment. Maybe you're sitting here today and you're like, I haven't really given much thought about this Jesus thing. Sure, maybe there's a God. Sure, maybe that church thing works for some people, but you're kind of indifferent to the whole thing. But you have a choice to make today. What will you do with what you just heard? When the soldier saw that Jesus had died, he knew that this must be the Son of God. And those of you in the room today that you've kind of been indifferent up until this moment, you have heard that Jesus came and he died and he rose again for you. What are you going to do with that? How will you respond? Now, maybe in a room this size, there's people in here that you're like, I relate most to the criminal, the undeserving. You're sitting there going, Chase, if you knew my past, if you knew the things I've done, if you knew where I've been, I don't know if anyone can forgive me. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't believe that I deserve anything. But the thing I love about Jesus is to this criminal who deserved the death, sitting next to him, he looked at him and he said, today, you can be with me in paradise. And I want to look out there to someone in the room that doesn't feel worthy of God's love, doesn't feel that they deserve it, doesn't feel that their past makes them anything good enough for the love of Jesus. And I want to say, today, you can make a decision to begin to follow after Jesus as your Lord and your leader and follow him all the way to heaven. God loves you. Your past doesn't have to define who you are. Your future can be heaven because of Jesus. So it would be crazy if I didn't give an opportunity for someone in the room that says, I've never done that. I've never put my faith in Christ. I'm undeserving or I'm indifferent to the whole thing. I just want to give you an opportunity right now. Right where you sit, from your heart to God, it's a simple step to pray something where you say, God, I know that I have messed up. I know I failed. But God, I believe Jesus came and he died and he rose again for me. And I want him to be the Lord and leader of my life. And I want to follow him today. From your heart to God, right where you sit, you can take this simple step. But let me just say this. It is a simple step, but it is a high commitment. A decision to follow Jesus. Not just pray a prayer and continue to live however you want, but to follow after the life and teaching of Jesus. But there is no better life than one that follows after Jesus. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. And maybe you're in the room today and you said, no, I'm a follower of Jesus. I've heard this. This isn't my first Easter chase. Been there, done that. And I want to ask you something. Maybe you relate most to Mary. What I love about Mary is she went and she began to tell people what had happened to her. And many people didn't believe her. Some thought she was crazy. And my challenge to you is maybe you should be more like Mary. All she did was share what had happened. And that's all I think God is calling you to do. Would you be willing to share what Jesus has done in your life? Would you be willing to share with other people what he can do for them? I promise not everyone's gonna believe you. That's okay. Some might think you're crazy. That's okay. But Mary continued to go on and tell people, Jesus is alive. My hope and prayer for all of us here today is that this good news that was shared 2,000 years ago from Mary, you would be reminded is still good news today for everyone. And be challenged to just tell people what you know. Jesus is alive and he loves you. Let me pray. God, I'm so grateful for your love, for your son, for this opportunity to sit in this place and to intentionally remember that Jesus is alive. I pray that if there was anyone in the room or listening online today that started today, took that simple step to invite Jesus to be their Lord and leader, to confess with their mouth that he's Lord, to believe that he came and died and rose again, anyone who did that, I pray that they would be bold and brave and find one of our pastors just to share so we can celebrate with them. I pray that they would begin to follow after Jesus today. And for anyone in the room that has done that or just did that now, I pray that we would all get the courage that Mary had to share this good news. As we go to Easter celebrations and we find eggs and we eat food and we sit around, I just pray that we would remember today that Jesus is alive, and that should drastically change everything about us. We love you, and we thank you